4 years. That's how long one of my guests' most recent deals took to close. Another one the same month, 30 days. Eimear McCann runs commercial at TrialView, one of the fastest growing AI dispute platforms in UK legal tech. In this conversation, she gets honest about the tension between selling per matter and selling by subscription, why she puts a price on every pilot, even when the client asks for it for free, and the one go-to-market channel most legal tech founders are still pouring money into that she says has been completely decimated. If you sell into law firms, and I'm guessing you do if you listen to this show, this one's for you. This is taking legal tech to market. Let's go. Eimear, let's start. Tell us what TrialView does and who is the person at a law firm or in-house team who typically signs the contract?
Yeah, good question. The latter part is a very good question. So TrialView is an AI disputes platform, which is designed for the full life cycle of a dispute. And I think, as you probably already know, but litigation and disputes is kind of like its own micro profession within legal, and the technology aspect of legal tech in terms of litigation has been kind of quite slow compared to other areas such as contract review, etc. E-discovery, which is at the very early stage, has been around for a very long time. And then COVID and lockdown totally changed our perception of how the hearing looked, at the other end of the spectrum. So you got kind of e-discovery right through to the hearing. And TrialView captures all of that kind of from the e-discovery stage onwards. In fact, it is kind of a bit of an e-discovery like platform through to the bundle, then through to evidence presentation, transcription at the hearing itself.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really a kind of end-to-end disputes platform. In terms of who kind of is a decision maker, very lawyerly answer, but it just really depends. Law firms are so different, legal teams in-house are so different. So typically decision makers would be the partner in a law firm, or it could be a GC or head of litigation in an in-house team. But obviously there's so many segments within legal at the moment. You have obviously the innovation team, you have knowledge lawyers, and obviously they do feed into the kind of the buying decision ultimately as well.
Do you ever have those situations where, does it always end up with quite a lot of people in the process by the time you've got to the end, or do you ever maybe just have one or two people and manage to get it through?
It just, again, really, really depends. I feel like I'm going to use saying it depends for every question. So I think, as you can imagine, with the bigger law firms, there tend to be an awful lot of stakeholders involved, and an awful lot of time is spent going through procurement. And as you know, InfoSec is not a kind of a tight, compressed process, so that can take a lot of time. So a lot of the time we are dealing with everyone and all the different kind of personas, because, for example, the paralegal, the junior associate, they're the ones who are using the tools. They're the ones who are in the weeds doing the bundling on a daily basis. The innovation team obviously have, their own kind of KPIs, their own agenda, and they want to make sure that they're taking the right tool on board. And obviously the partner is going to be there at the hearing, ultimately, if they are going to use this for a hearing, and will ultimately make the decision. So yeah, we do tend to have a real kind of myriad of personas. What does surprise me, though, is sometimes you will get a firm who will just come in, be really decisive. You maybe only have a couple of people involved, just a couple of calls, discovery call, demo, and then they kind of make the decision to go ahead. But that's quite unusual.
Yeah, of course. What is the average sales cycle?
It's a very good question. Gosh, we actually just, good example is we just closed a deal last week, and our first demo was 4 years ago.
Wow.
And there's loads of factors as to why that took so long. But then we found that then with our enterprise model, it could be maybe 30 days or shorter. So.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And so just going back in terms of your career, I guess, so when you joined in 2021, the incumbent in UK litigation was so embedded that people genuinely thought they had a contract with the court. So what was the wedge you used to win your first deals against that perception?
Yeah, I think it was a huge education piece. So I suppose having worked in the profession, I knew the way that we had been trained, and you are trained to be analytical, to be cynical, and you get really used to having certain things in place. And, from a psychological and behavioral point of view, we all like the way things are. We crave change, conversely, but we like the way things are. And I think the one company that did a brilliant job started out doing transcription, then moved into kind of the bundling and evidence presentation. It was just really enlightening because you're entering a market where, obviously you do your due diligence, you do your research, your market research for a couple of months. But it's only really when you start to chat to people that you start to understand how embedded a product is. So it wasn't really like, oh, comparison. It was actually an education piece of, that's not the only, there are actually other options out there. And that was really building credibility, brand awareness. And it's not obviously something that happens overnight. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of turning up at events and constantly having conversations with people that you think will actually one day, because you have to be very optimistic in this market, don't you? One day you will be a client, and getting quite used to the rejection because you know that actually that is what they've been told, that they only or what they thought, that they only had one option to use a specific platform. But obviously everything's completely changed now with the explosion of AI. So we're having completely different conversations than we were 4 years ago.
Well, that was going to be, I was just thinking that when you were talking there. What are the questions that the buyers are asking you now versus what they were asking you in 2022?
Yeah, so I think originally it was very much, why are you different? Well, first of all, it's like, wow, there is another tool out there. Then, why are you different? Why would we use you in case of this kind of legacy instead of this legacy tool? Whereas now we're getting an awful lot more questions about, what AI models we're using, how secure is the data, where is the data hosted? And it's really very much about using AI, both at the kind of trial craft stage, but also in the hearing. So it's all those questions about, again, it's still about credibility, but it's a different conversation about credibility. And at the end of the day, clients want to know that your company is going to be around in 12 months, 3 years, 5 years. And I think that's become really hard for clients at the moment because they really don't know whether, you've got these huge companies, which we're all totally aware of, the Harveys and Legoras, which are huge valuations. And, they've become very embedded very, very quickly. They've done an amazing, amazing job of doing that within about 12 months or however long it's been. And so that gives law firms a lot of assurance and reassurance, whereas all these startups that have AI functionality, there are kind of concerns about, we read a lot about, is this a bubble? Is this hype? And if so, what does that look like if your platform is AI based, or sorry, kind of like a wraparound? So I think the two things that I think of are obviously you've got legal and domain specific tools like TrialView. It's specifically designed for litigation, has been around for a very long time. And then the AI is just on top to augment, versus a platform which is AI first. And therefore, if there's an implosion or if AI does become very expensive, what was the fundamental, software and technology that existed first? And I think that's a huge concern for clients. So they do tend to get, IT, innovation, colleagues on calls or in separate calls to really dig into that, whereas that wasn't such an issue a few years ago. It was really just about, are you more cost effective? Who have you worked with? What kind of cases can you handle this amount of documentation? Commercial litigation is, you're dealing with, thousands, hundreds of thousands of documents, and they want to know that your software can actually deal with that and that there won't be any issues. It's kind of like I used to be the person in the courtroom, and, the feeling that, if something goes wrong, when you're sitting there in the courtroom, you feel totally responsible. So that's still part of the conversation, but now you've got this AI concern on top of all of that, really.
It's an interesting objection to try and overcoming, isn't it? Will you exist in 12 months' time? It's probably, yeah, it's quite fascinating just how the world's going with that. And with pilots, obviously, so key to getting any kind of buy-in. What does a good pilot look like from your side, and what's the metrics that you're pushing to measure that a horizontal tool like one of the general purpose AI tools can't touch?
Yeah, I think they're really key. And I think actually years ago, I've worked in legal tech for nearly 9 years, and I think years ago pilots weren't such a big thing. Proof of concept pilots were kind of more in the outside of legal, in the SaaS world, kind of in the enterprise world. But yeah, they're so important. And I think without pilots and without POCs, we probably wouldn't, have the amount of enterprise clients that we have. And, thankfully, because we do a good job whenever we have a pilot and POC, I mean, 95% of the time they'll turn into a client that has that kind of longevity. But in terms of what success looks like, so I suppose the first thing for me is very much having that kind of discovery call in terms of what are the specific use cases, what are the pain points, the usual stuff that you would expect. But also key for us is we always suggest that they use the pilot or the proof of concept on a live case rather than having dummy data. So instead of having data that's, in the public domain, etc., it has a huge impact on engagement. We found that at the start, we had a client who used it on dummy data, and actually we gave them a free trial versus it being paid. And obviously, psychology of pricing dictates that if you're getting something for free, you will obviously assign the same value and time. And
Sure.
so even just even if you have a nominal fee for a pilot, we found that engagement went way up. And also having it on a live matter makes a big difference. We have success criteria in place for every pilot that we do. So we kind of will discuss with the client at the start, what is it that you want to achieve? Because what we find is actually when you ask a couple of really simple questions at the start, what is it that you actually want to get out of this? Sometimes, teams will go back and say, I don't really know exactly what we're trying to get out of it. We just wanted to try it out. And those kind of pilots don't tend to work so well because they don't have a clear kind of vision at the end. So the ones that have clear success criteria, we're able to kind of monitor what the engagement and the usage is, report it back. There's a really tight feedback loop with our product and support team so that you're constantly, if there are glitches or issues, they're constantly feeding back into our team and we're in touch with them like really quickly, really responsive. So I think it's definitely key.
It's an interesting point about the free pilots versus some sort of cost attached and the psychology around that. I guess that's what they call friction, isn't it? Creating that bit of friction, which it's so easy to say yes to something which is free, but it's also really easy to forget about it afterwards. But even if you spend 20-30 quid on something, you want to get your money's worth, don't you? So it's a key point, and one I don't hear enough these days. One thing I think we spoke about originally in our original calls, you said there's a tension between the per matter motion and the enterprise SaaS motion. Do you mind kind of unpacking that a little bit in terms of what that looks like? Is it different salespeople, different pricing, different sales cycles? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? If you're in the company that, I mean, the way the TrialView is set up, you have two core verticals, and obviously they're segmented further. But as you said, the per matter and the subscription models are two completely different worlds, really, because you're not going to get that in the the contract review world, for example. Everything's transactional. But I think whenever you have the per matter pricing, they tend to probably generate more revenue because you could have a huge case where, as I mentioned, there'll be a huge amount of documents. There's loads of users on board, and you have lots of services used at the hearing, etc. And it's really important that we have those cases, back to the original point, kind of the very embedded platform kind of had that market share in terms of all of the big cases that were running through the commercial courts in London, and being able to say that, well, actually, we've worked with X of the top 10 reported cases in 2025. We've done the same in 2026. It's really important from an awareness perspective, credibility perspective, but also from a revenue perspective. But then obviously you want then, and investors want to see recurring revenue. So, and you want to have that kind of stickiness as well that I mentioned earlier. So there is definitely a tension, but I think that they're not mutually exclusive as concepts. A lot of companies have exactly the same issue. I think what we find is the approaching the subscription model is very much about, we have a client, for example, who may have taken us on a per matter basis, and then it's really up to our customer success and sales team to say, well, what went wrong, what went right, etc., and then bringing them on board as a subscription client, because ultimately it's going to be more cost effective for them. But I suppose we also do think quite a lot about how many stakeholders are involved in closing a deal on a per matter basis versus subscription. What does procurement look like, and particularly on the InfoSec side of things? What does that look like per matter versus subscription? And also, how many hours have you spent closing that deal versus that deal? And the other thing as well is, with both, but probably mainly in the subscription side, if we have a client that we're working with, we're still small and agile enough to be able to say, we can actually build that for you, so we can tailor the product so that it meets your needs. And then you've got product time, you've got support time. And so we do assess that in terms of where we're going to next. And then those sales verticals are divided, between our team as well, because there's always just going to be, I suppose, there's always that kind of natural tension. But I do feel that there's a natural, you can actually nearly feel it kind of happening organically in terms of which one you start to push slightly more. And there's no reason why they can't continue to run in parallel. It's a really big market, so there's definitely room for both.
And in general, where does your pipeline actually come from? What are the most successful channels for you for either of those options, or all of it together?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a bit of a mix, really. So I think we have been to an awful lot of events over the past couple of years. I mean, event season in LegalTech. There's so many, aren't there? Can't keep up with them. There's just new ones all the time, and they're great. Some of them are brilliant. A lot does come out of events, content, social media. A lot of it is relationship building, which hasn't gone anywhere. I know there's been a change in the market. I think the legal tech market's now valued at something crazy like 40 billion versus what the valuation was a few years ago. But I still think relationships. It's still, when I think of the ones that deals, I suppose, that we've all closed recently, there have been relationships that we built up. But we still have had a couple that have been from kind of, the outbound campaigns. But I think the kind of outbound email campaigns have basically been decimated in recent years. They kind of had their golden era, but people are just, can't really hack them anymore, can they?
Yeah, I was speaking to somebody about this on season 1, actually, around, I think last year you had, maybe I was behind, but I think it was last year that the prominence of tools like Clay came out. And so you can use a tool like Lemlist, but to send lots of emails to exactly the right person. Clay's going to make sure it's completely enriched or personalized or whatever. So that's great. All these people are getting personalized messages, and all you have to do is click a button. No problem with that is these people are now just getting 100 personalized messages, which might sound great if there was just one of them, but everyone knows everyone's using AI. So people are getting more spam, no matter how good that spam is, and it just wears people out. And I think it's actually, I find it really reassuring that, and I hear it a lot, that actually the number one way companies are winning business are by events or by community building or by adding value back to their target audience. One, the Solve Intelligence Series B legal tech firm. I had them on in season 1, and the events is their number one way they win business. They work out where all the patent attorneys going to be, who they can sell to, and then they're going to 40, or they will have done 40 events this year, and that's their number one strategy. And I think, again, the human element is so key. The tool and the product is so important, but you have to have that human element which builds that trust, don't you?
Yeah, completely. And it's funny that whenever you mention, community, I just keep saying this year, we feel like we feel we're all being pulled along in this world of AI, and that we're not actually in control of it. And nobody likes that feeling. So if we have that focus on community and you bring people together to discuss it, and there's no better profession to regulate it and make sure it doesn't get out of control than legal. But yeah, we find that, if we have tailored events and genuinely bringing people together to have really interesting conversations. We also ran quite a few AI literacy workshops for existing clients as well, because you have to be able to give something back. And it's really everyone is in a state of overwhelm. And so, yeah, I think you're right. Community is kind of key. And I find it really reassuring as well that even though I work in tech and I'm all for innovation and disruption, we all need to get together and chat about it, discuss, and then actually work out, well, how can we make our product better for you, and how can we help you? And obviously, we're all trying to move in the same direction.
Absolutely. Is anything in terms of go to market, I suppose emails aside, that you've invested a lot in over the last few years that didn't work out, that actually you thought, yeah, maybe that wasn't worth our time as much?
It didn't work. I mean, I'm sure there have been, but Kansas is no way. There's so many kind of you make mistakes all the time. But I can't think specifically of the one thing I would say, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily a mistake, but my sense going forward is that it's just again what you said about community. People really want to have smaller tailored sessions. I think the bigger events and going to loads of them, you can become quite diluted.
Yeah.
And my sense is very much that going in big and headline sponsor, etc., unless you are a Harvey and Legora, etc., that something that is really worthwhile. What is the ROI? And it's so hard to, you obviously have all our data on our CRMs, but it's very hard sometimes to really track what was the ROI on a specific kind of sponsorship. And so I wonder whether going forward, kind of smaller events, fireside chats, dinners. So kind of like going back to it used to be a bit where, people would go out and bring people out for dinner, bring them out for lunch, have a chat. But it's just, I think that the bar is higher now in the sense that people want, well, I don't want to just have a chat. I want to be educated, and I want to understand who you are, what your vision is, where your company's going.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I got into recruitment, which was nearly 20 years ago, not quite, nearly 20 years ago, obviously we were all in the office 5 days a week. Everyone was in the city working, and probably the number one way to establish great customers and great clients was to take them on a big night out. And it was that was constantly what you're doing every night, kind of wining and dining people, and you built the best relationships with that. I think that kind of started to shift for me in kind of maybe 2013, 2014, at least in my market. And it became a lot more, you needed to add value. You needed to have something which could help your customers first, and that would help you build the relationship. I'm sure there were still elements of taking people out of the piss or whatever it was, but there was definitely, you needed to add more value. And then COVID hits, and apart from anything else, suddenly no one's working in the office. You can't take them out. You can't do that anymore. So it's got to be pure value. And I think we've definitely stuck in that element of the relationship building is definitely there. I think the world's a bit of a different place from taking people on nights out so much now. I'm sure it happens, but certainly not for me. But I'm sure it happens out there. But I think creating something in that community, or just something that's going to help your customers, and then people buy off the back of that trust they built with you, I think that's definitely here to stay, and I think that's a good thing. And I like the world better now than I did 20 years ago. I think, because it was exhausting.
It's not sustainable though, is it? I mean, well, I mean, people did do it for years, didn't they? But yeah, I think it's calmed down in that sense. It's a bit more balance. So yeah, that's a positive, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'm always interested interested in the hiring side, in particular within sales. And so I'd be interested to get your take on, for your business, what a great salesperson profile looks like, someone who can connect with your ICP and your market. What do you look for? What are the flags, the green flags, let's start with, in terms of someone you think could sell your product successfully?
Yeah, it's back to that education piece. Somebody who really gets it, that they don't necessarily have to be in the legal world, but, obviously that helps. But I just think somebody who's enthusiastic, high energy, relentlessly optimistic, goal oriented, and super focused. Just really good with people. I just, we have people in our company, and I just think, God, you're just always so upbeat and positive, and because you do get a lot of. It is hard, and I think sales is an art form, and I think people don't really give it enough respect. I know I didn't. I worked in law, and I always kind of thought of sales. I don't know. I just always thought it was this other kind of world, but obviously we're all selling something, and actually, I think that's another good thing that's come out of the way the legal tech market and the way that legal has changed so much is people are starting to view sales as, this its own kind of profession almost within legal, because so many lawyers are leaving the profession and moving into the legal tech world and actually wanting to sell, because, you can be called loads of different things, innovation partner and legal tech company, etc. But you're selling the product, and you're doing that by building the community, educating, and always having the energy to keep going and think of new ideas. And it can be quite creative as well, which is something that I think the best salespeople that I've seen anyway they've got the structure, they've got the process, but they're very creative about where they're moving to next. But it's based on fact and data, and that's if you can marry those two, because they kind of seem that they wouldn't work together or align. But yeah.
Do you think they need to be an ex-lawyer to be successful?
I don't think so at all, no. I mean, I think some people seem to make it really natural, I think some people are just very good at it. And I think it's because they've got high levels of emotional intelligence. So they can read people, they can read a situation. They know when is a time to start moving the conversation from, it could be just a general chat more over to product, and then kind of getting in front of the right people. I think if you're always thinking of it in terms of, I always says to my kids, if you can always put yourself in someone else's shoes, it's really simple, but if you can all the time, personal life, professional life, it makes a huge difference. And I think really good salespeople do that. They've got their eye on where they want to go to, but they're incredibly empathetic.
Absolutely. And we were talking just before the call about just how busy we all are right now in legal tech, which is a great place to be. If you look at the next let's talk about the next kind of 6 months, getting to the end of 2026. What does great look like for TrialView, and I guess what do you need to do to get there?
Yeah, I think great for us looks. I mean, we're definitely going that way, and this year already. But I suppose we have certain targets in place in terms of revenue, both on the per matter and the subscription side. We've grown the team a lot this year, and also on the product side. So we have a brilliant head of product who joined us this year. He's fantastic, and so we're kind of got this new case intelligence part of the software, which is an agentic part of the platform, and it's almost like having the brain of the case kind of captured within the platform itself. And whenever I see that, I think, wow, if I had that whenever I was actually working in litigation, that would have been phenomenal. So I think it's a mix, obviously, the usual stuff, keep pushing towards the revenue that we have set out, make the product as good as it can be. And then, growing the team to ensure that because we have a brilliant product, I think we probably want to grow our sales team a bit more probably this year.
And in terms of legal tech, because I think you've been working in legal tech since before it was cool. It's been cool for the last kind of 2 or 3 years. What with this wave we're in right now, is it a bubble? What do you see on the other side of that? Is there going to be a plateau? Is there going to be a dip? Just if you had your crystal ball, what do you anticipate?
Yeah, it's such a hard question. I really wish I had an answer for that. I think there are all the signs of an AI bubble. I mean, there's circular investment and with all of these companies on a global level, but I don't know whether how that implodes or explodes or however that looks. I don't know whether it will have huge ramifications on this shift in legal generally, because I feel as though, even say hypothetically, that AI became more expensive than having a human lawyer because people are now starting to predict that. Say that did happen, the fundamental tools and workflows in law have changed now forever. The perception of law, I think, has totally changed. And, you know, the fact that you've got, huge sector agnostic companies like, Claude coming in and developing tools specifically for legal changes everything in my mind, because it's as if they see law as part of a huge knowledge ecosystem and law is just one little part of it. And if that's what they're thinking, that kind of means, well, all of the tech that we see, especially the knowledge based stuff, can all also kind of feed into law, legal. And you think of the legal market itself is, I don't know, 1 trillion, or it's crazy, crazy valuation. So there's still an awful lot more to go at when you weigh that up against what the legal tech market is currently projected to be valued at. So I think that we'll see some companies will, I think anyway, can fall away if they don't have a strong foundation. And I think we'll see a lot of consolidation and a lot of acquisitions. So bigger companies, I imagine, will be a bit more strategic about how they all kind of work together. I mean, we've already seen that happen in the past couple of months. Companies working with other companies that you wouldn't expect, because you almost kind of think, are you not a competitor? So I think there'll be consolidation. But I think that we've kind of moved beyond that point where, we can't go back in terms of how we used to work. And even if AI did become too expensive, there's things will change, and perhaps there'll just be different models that will be used. Not to get into the whole kind of Chinese versus US kind of models, but yeah, things are changing so fast. It's really hard to know where we'll be in even 2 months' time, I think.
Well, hopefully we're all in a good place, but I'll be absolutely rooting for TrialView for the rest of the year and beyond, and looking forward to hear how things land for you. And yeah, Eimear, thank you so much for being a part of taking legal tech to market.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks, Paul.